I, at 30 years old, found myself ending a 3-year-long engagement with my ex, who was 29. We both lived in the United States, but our initial encounter happened far from either of our homes. Picture this. I resided on the West Coast while he was on the East. It was a classic case of long-distance romance, separated by thousands of miles of land. To make this relationship work, for about a year and a half, I dedicated my breaks from school to traveling back and forth to see him. At that time, I was engrossed in a school program that could not be transferred elsewhere, but the tug of love was too strong to ignore. Living with someone is quite different from visiting them, even if those visits span several weeks. This was my very first time moving in with a partner, officially and wholeheartedly. Perhaps, in hindsight, it was my inexperience in such matters that clouded my judgment. Those initial 4 months of dating can only be described as a whirlwind of nightly video calls, constant texts throughout the day, and a plethora of promises and dreams for a future together. This strategy worked wonders. He expertly won over my heart with what I now see were love bombs dropped from afar. Our relationship had many romantic firsts. When I decided to surprise him with a plane ticket to visit for the summer, I was deeply immersed in the idea of us. Looking back, it's easy to see that I was completely smitten. And more than that, I chose to view everything through rose-colored glasses. Any warning signs or red flags were quickly dismissed or rationalized away. They seemed not that bad from where I stood. Visiting him that summer, I was fully aware that his work demanded a lot from him, as it was his busy season. Nonetheless, my time with him filled me with boundless excitement. I was unabashedly enthusiastic each time we reunited, almost like an overjoyed puppy eagerly awaiting attention. It sounds naive now, but every moment together felt filled with potential and promise. This long-distance dynamic was unlike anything I had experienced before, and I was thoroughly committed. Fast forward to a time when a monumental decision had to be made. I completed my educational pursuits, sold my beloved car, packed up my life's belongings, and embarked on a journey across the country to start a new chapter with him. The transition from occasional visits to a full-time partnership was enlightening, to say the least. The real him surfaced gradually, like the slow peel of an onion, to reveal increasingly intense layers of his true self. Despite what romance novels and films had led me to believe about moving in with someone, the reality was starkly contrasting. The rose-tinted lens through which I had once viewed the relationship began to clear. I began to notice unsettling changes that crescendoed into something undeniable. I was living amidst a storm. He slowly, yet steadily stripped everything away from me. Psychological and emotional turbulence became a daily ordeal, and fear grew into a constant companion. The manipulation, control, and toxic behaviors were layered and insidious, leaving me feeling more like a captive than a partner. The situation was akin to finding oneself trapped in quicksand, gradual yet inescapable. Each day I remained, I felt the grip around me tighten. As I reeled under the weight of our deteriorating relationship, somewhere in the back of my mind, I began to cultivate a contingency plan. Secretly, I started saving funds, money that could afford me an escape ticket out of the quagmire of our life together. The plan was formulated with the understanding that one day, when I had enough, I could silently slip away, ship my belongings back to where I started, and begin anew. Yet, amidst this precarious scenario, he decided to propose. The proposal caught me by complete surprise, as though I were a deer caught in headlights. A myriad of emotions coursed through me, but all I could manage to say was a hesitant, "I love you." It was a moment hoped for once, but realized under strange and ominous circumstances. He expected immediate celebrations, wanting to share the news with his family and friends. However, when my reaction was not as exuberant as he wished, devoid of jumping for joy or flaunting the engagement ring, his demeanor shifted dramatically. Accusations cascaded down on me, frustrations about how my lack of enthusiastic response was tarnishing his reputation. "Just pretend to be happy. You're making me look bad. You represent me," he shouted, desperation in his voice. That was when the last shard of doubt shattered. I understood with crystalline clarity just how dire my situation had become, and it was much more profound than ever before. There, right in that proposal, revealed more red flags than I had previously been willing to see in their entirety. My physical safety became a weighty concern, and I knew I had to act. The realization was stark and unignorable. It had become critical to prioritize my well-being and ultimately, my future. Fast forward to a dire turning point. My graduation was complete, and with the weight of a hefty decision, I sold my trusty vehicle, packed every treasured item I owned, and journeyed across this vast nation to unite my future with his. Dreams of partnership and shared laughter veiled the harsher reality of our impending coexistence. Upon merging our lives beneath one roof, the truths I had been willfully blind to slowly emerged from the shadows. In fragments, each day brought about a clearer reflection of who he was. His darker nature, once hinted at, was now glaring, like the sun dawning after an ominous night. The gradual unraveling of this facade was nothing short of perplexing and heartbreaking. Initially, affection flowed easily, intermixed with brief moments of dissonance. But as time wore on, the fractures in his charming demeanor widened into gaping chasms of aggression and hostility. I started noticing he was quick to anger, and his words, once loving, turned into verbal lashings that left me speechless and wounded. What began as subtle manipulations expanded into a multitude of abuses, each more destructive than the last. I was caught in a storm not just of emotional and psychological abuse, but every conceivable type one could name. It unfolded slowly enough that, like a frog in heating water, the severity was masked by familiarity, until it wasn't. Like vines growing overnight, choking the light and air from their host, his control tightened around my life. Over months, I found myself slipping away, not just from an environment, but from myself. My identity eroded under his oppressive demand for control. My friends and family, once a daily reassurance, became distant memories as he cut me off. Isolation became suffocation. Each day blended together until I struggled to recognize the person looking back at me in the mirror. The little voice inside, though barely audible, reminded me of who I used to be, resilient and deserving of a life not built on fear. In secrecy, I started hoarding slivers of hope in the form of savings to fund my escape. It was clandestinely stashed away with aspirations of freedom, each dollar a small step towards a return to who I truly was. The moment of clarity came not with a bang, but a quiet realization. I was terrified. My instincts screamed self-preservation, and they grew louder with each passing interaction until it couldn't be ignored. The tension was palpable, an ever-present reminder that safety was not guaranteed with him. In my heart, a plan brewed softly, careful not to draw attention. I knew the moment for action would come, and I had to be ready. Reaching out to anyone would risk exposure and inevitably more wrath. So, I played my part in his drama, all the while waiting for the cue to slip between the curtains of his tightly controlled stage. Just as I felt the sands of time slipping through my fingers, he chose this moment of undetected tumult to propose. The irony was not lost on me. Just as I plotted my departure, he saw a chance for a fresh beginning. But the romantic gesture was hollow, a plaster facade slathered over an unstable foundation. It took all I had to muster a tepid smile, suppressing the welling fear that threatened to choke me. "I love you," fell from my lips almost against my will, a conditioned response. His once warm and inviting eyes were now pinpricks of frustration and disappointment. He expected jubilation, a joyous proclamation to the skies, instead finding an ocean of unease and quiet resistance in my stance. The freedom of choice was foreign here, and my lack of engagement triggered anger in him, climbing up the scale to disturbance and aggression. "Pretend it, act it, at least for them," he hissed, caught up in his consuming need to maintain a pristine public persona. "You represent me." Each word was both a plea and a demand, hammering down my little remaining autonomy. This directive, while under the guise of care, was a mandate with no room for my voice or refusal. It was in that instance I realized how far gone his vision of partnership was, warped beyond recognition into suffocating submission. The urgency of escape became dire, an imperative not just for comfort, but for survival. I knew in that instant that any further hesitation could cost me dearly. I had to leave immediately, quietly, and completely. When he proposed to me, it was as if I had been struck by lightning, momentarily dazed by the brilliance of a moment I had once dreamed of, but now feared. My heart pounded, not with joy but with trepidation, whispering urgently to every corner of my conscious mind that this was not love. This was a desperate maneuver, a manipulative play in a script I hadn't chosen. I stood there, caught in the glare of his expectation, while the weight of my impending decision seemed to cement my feet to the ground. The words, "I love you," clung to the tip of my tongue with a familiarity that was now bitter. They were drawn out not by the warmth of love, but by the mechanical necessity of survival in that tense atmosphere. His eyes, once so full of promise and allure, now bore into me with an intensity that stripped away any illusion of safety I might have still harbored. They were expectant, seeking confirmation of the facade, looking to feed on a reaction that should have been second nature to any thrilled fiancé. But such an act of joy was alien to me, alien to the reality we lived. In my mind, the remnants of affection were entwined with sorrow and fear, creating a complicated knot I couldn't swiftly untangle. His love, once a gentle embrace, had morphed into a cage, and I had become an unwilling prisoner. His frustration mounted as he realized my detached demeanor was not from mere shock, but from a pervasive unease that lay heavier than the glistening ring he offered. "You're making me look bad," he accused, his voice rising like a tsunami, ready to crash down and drown my fleeting courage. The command echoed, sharp and biting. "Pretend to be happy. You represent me." His demand was a projection of his own desperation, a demand for unquestioned loyalty to a charade that ensured his reputation remained untarnished. It was an order dressed as concern, a toxic blend of abuse cloaked in false affection. My response, or rather the lack thereof, was a betrayal in his eyes, a personal affront to the image he was eager to construct. Agitation bubbled beneath the surface of his skin, threatening to spill over into another hateful tirade that would surely follow should I continue to resist. I stood at the precipice of two worlds, one familiar in its painful predictability, the other a terrifying unknown that carried the promise of freedom and self-restoration. The moment stretched infinitely, my mind scrambling for clarity in a room that spun with deceit and impending decisions. Outwardly, I appeared frozen in that moment, a deer trapped in headlights, while inwardly worlds crashed and rebuilt in a matter of seconds. This proposal, meant to solidify our future together, instead solidified my determination to reclaim my life from the clutches of his manipulation. A proposal was supposed to be the start of something beautiful, yet it illuminated the shadows we had fostered together, shadows I needed desperately to escape. The ring, a symbol of what should be eternal love, felt heavy with implications and chains, weighted down not by precious metal, but by expectation and a history of suppression and fear. I knew then, with disquieting certainty, that my exit had to come before my resolve faltered. His dreams of union were my nightmares of entrapment, and I had to cling to the remnants of courage to break away. So I kept my silence as the storm of his anger built in intensity. I did not fuel it with words because each utterance would grant him only another inch of what he sought. Through this silence, he saw neither acceptance nor denial, only a truth he wasn't prepared to confront. As he continued his chaotic diatribe, desperate to salvage his ego and plans, I tuned out his words, knowing they were no longer my reality. In the eye of that storm, amidst his accusations, I found a strange calm. My path was illuminated by the lightning of his revelation, the urgency to leave, quietly and completely. I understood then that my answer had not been the words he demanded, but the silence that held my truth. The proposal had not brought us closer together. It had finally driven us apart, and I needed to leave behind the life that was never truly mine. I knew it was time to go, and the only way to protect myself was to leave quietly. Days after the proposal incident, I planned my escape with meticulous care, knowing that any slip could shatter my fragile plan. Every moment was calculated, every action measured against the need for safety and freedom. My heart raced daily with the adrenaline of impending change, as I secretly saved every dollar I could and sold off non-essentials under the guise of improving our lives together. I didn't dare divulge my intention to anyone who might inadvertently disclose my plans. The fear of unexpected ramifications kept me tight-lipped and cautious. I knew he had connections, people who idolized him, people who, if tipped off, might alert him to my intent. The fear of discovery loomed large, casting a shadow over each moment up until my departure. His emotional and sometimes physical volatility made it imperative that my exit remain a silent one. I started discreetly gathering my important documents, ensuring he wouldn't notice anything amiss in our shared space. I contacted a moving company under an assumed name, arranging for my belongings to be collected and stored. It would be one less burden to carry mentally and physically as I made my escape. The night before my departure, I sat in the bathroom, the only area where I could lock the door and have a moment of privacy under the guise of self-care. I took a long, purposeful look at myself in the mirror, seeing the tired, strained reflection staring back. The indelible marks of stress and fear were etched into my features, a testament to the battles I fought daily. But beneath the exhaustion, there was also the flicker of resilience, a burgeoning hope that had been stifled for far too long. That glimmer of hope was my anchor as I crept through the pitch-black apartment that night, heart pounding in rhythm with each calculated step. I carried only a small bag, mere essentials, what I needed to navigate my escape. Beneath the cloak of darkness, I took one last look at the life that had entrapped me. Morning didn't bring the usual dread. Instead, it welcomed a new horizon. My previous boss, whom I trusted implicitly, was my lifeline as I explained that my relationship was unsustainable. They understood and agreed to help obfuscate my maneuvers, sheltering my whereabouts should inquiries be made. I expressed gratitude through tears of relief, knowing that bonds of understanding could sometimes be stronger than those of blood. By the time his anger turned to suspicion, I was already thousands of miles away, ensconced in a city anonymous enough to wipe the slate clean. Our breakup was my silent resignation, a quiet revolution of independence. The digital tendrils of our past life together dangled unanswered, cut off as if they never existed. I did not leave to punish or to hurt. It was a retreat to safety, to sanity. For, in that silence, while he berated my absence to others, lay the screams of truth I could no longer ignore. My voice would not be his accessory. My life would not be his to manipulate. He hadn't just lost me, he'd lost the control he thought he wielded. Placing my fate into my own hands, I whispered a farewell only my heart could hear, and I really, finally left him behind. As time went on, whispers about my sudden disappearance began to circulate. People started reaching out, wondering why someone as prominent in the community as him would have his fiancée vanish without a trace. It was a mystery to them, but to me, the reasons were crystal clear. I chose to avoid confronting the shadows of my past at first, sweeping my pain and experiences under the metaphorical rug in the hope of avoiding any lingering entanglements. But the human curiosity knows no bounds, and one by one, mutual friends and acquaintances emailed, texted, and called. In their messages, they carried the weight of curiosity and perhaps the hope that I'd shed some light on the situation. I never intended to expose the secrets I'd initially chosen to keep, but when faced with familiar voices asking the same questions over and over, I was finally ready. I told them the truth about why I had left, the truth that started with emotional manipulation and scaled to life-endangering instances that pushed me to the brink of fear. The truth of a web of deceit spun with such skill that even the closest to him had no inkling of its existence. The truth that unraveled the lies he spun about my great family emergency that supposedly forced my prolonged absence. I told those who reached out, life is strange, isn't it? Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. I recounted how I unknowingly lived with a man whose ambition blinded him to integrity, confessing how I uncovered the shadowy dealings he kept hidden. His professional betrayal was laid bare. The rival company, the deception, the desperate attempts to solidify a relationship under false pretenses, all steeped in the sour desperation of expiring business visas. These revelations were a reality check for everyone involved. Finally, the illusion began to crack, and people saw the truth. I felt vindicated, in large part due to the support and validation from those who had once known us as a pair. Each conversation was a gradual catharsis, and with every word, I released more of the burden I had carried in silence for so long. Now, I'm living a much better and healthier life. Picture me draped comfortably on my couch, a bowl of popcorn by my side, and my cat purring contentedly beside me. I'll admit there's a certain irony in watching from afar as my ex's grandiose plans unravel before him, all crafted by his own hands. While I hold no malice, I can't deny the sense of liberation in witnessing the chaos stem from his own decisions, devoid of my involvement. For instance, there was the Tesla, once the image of his aspirations, now a wreck from which he fortunately emerged unscathed. The funds he claimed were gathered for future dreams dissolved alongside the remnants of that car. It was symbolic somehow, a testament to the superficial layer of lies beneath which I unknowingly lived. Oddly enough, I find peace in knowing that his downfalls are self-inflicted, products of his own hubris and deception. It's a reminder of why I needed to distance myself so drastically, the deeper motive in my choice to break free. It's a closure I didn't anticipate, but welcomed wholeheartedly as I continue to rebuild this new chapter of my life.